it's not exactly what we're used to. So the Mishnah says, Mazgulo Chosheni v'chana ben Shoel Aviv. So it says we pour a second cup here, and this is where the child asks his father. We're on page 266, so it's the back side of this one. Yeah. Yeah. Ve'im ein das bebein, if the child doesn't know how to ask, aviv malamdo, his father teaches him. And then what does he teach him? We're familiar with this, manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halaylos. Why is this night different from all the other nights? Hello. Anyway. So there was the joke about there was a Jewish fellow. He was about to be knighted by the queen, and he had to memorize something to say, and then he forgot what to say, so he just said, Manishtana Laila Zemikol Aleilos. So then the queen asked, why is this night different from all the other nights? So Shebchol Haleilos Anu Ochlim Chametz Matzah, Laila Zekuloi Matzah. That's not one of the best jokes I have, but it's... So he starts off, as we're familiar, all other nights we eat chametz and matzah, either one, whatever we want to eat. And this night, only matzah. Shebechol haleilos anu ochlim sh'ar yirakos halayla hazeh marar. All other nights, we could eat any types of vegetables, and tonight marar. It's still basically what we have. And now this one we don't have at all. Shebechol haleilos anu ochlim basar tzalui shalok k'mavushal. Halayla hazeh kulei tzali. So it says on all other nights we could eat meat that's roasted, boiled, or cooked, and this night we only eat roasted meat. And then it ends off Shebechol haleilos anu matbilim pam achas halayla hazeh shetef yamim. Also slightly different than what we have. It says on all other nights we only dip once. It doesn't say only, but we dip once. And on all other nights, we dip once, and this night we dip twice. And the thing is that, so what are the differences? So we start off the same, like we're used to. So here on the bottom we have the Bartanura. So it says Halayla zeh kulei tzali. So it says Bizman shebeis hamikdash kayem haya ben shoel kach. That when the temple existed and we used to have the roasted korban Pesach, the Paschal lamb, that had to be totally roasted. There couldn't be any other liquids or anything. So that's when he would ask that. The interesting thing like that is that that wasn't all they ate that night, because they also ate the korban chagiga, which was we commemorate that by having the egg on the Seder plate, and it was supposed to be, the Pesach was supposed to be nochal ala sova. They're supposed to eat it when they were full. So what is this? Did that mean that the chagiga also had to be roasted? We don't really have any record that I'm aware of that the chagiga had to be roasted. You could prepare the chagiga, the other meat, the other sacrifice which was eaten, the shlamim offering and peace offerings. So that's something that we ate. You could prepare that any way you wanted. You didn't have, as far as I know, I don't think you had to roast it. So I'm not sure. I don't remember if the Gemara addresses that. I'm learning Pesachim now, but I'm only up to like Perek Zayin. I learned it before, but I'm learning again now. So I'm not up to this Perek. So I don't remember offhand, and I didn't look inside to get the answer for that, why it's like that. But and then it says we only dip once, and the version we have is we don't even dip once. Instead, we dip twice. Although a lot of people dip all the time now at the Shabbos, say people like to dip, challah and bread and different things, So I know in my house they like to do that. They like to have all kinds of dips and things. I don't know, it's popular. It's like in Israel, I know it's popular having all kinds of dips. I don't know, that's like hummus, and we like the tomato dip. I don't know, that's.
So what is special about dipping? I mean, you just the act of it, that it should be specified.
Yeah. Well, it's just seeming that it's just things that the children notice to be different. A rabbi of mine, Rabbi Siegel, he says he remembers his kids would start like making sniffing noises when Saturday night came around because they knew Havdalah and they're sniffing the besamim. So even they're 2 years, and my kids, I have like a 1-year-old. He likes to sniff the besamim, and he's very, but like, so children are aware of things. They notice things that are, regular routines. They get used to routines, and then it goes on. I just thought it was interesting to bring these different. There are different versions of the 4 questions, not just what we're used to. I think the Rambam actually. I don't know, it's one of the Rishonim, it's either Rambam or maybe it was Sadia Gaon, who was before the Rishonim, only has 3 questions in the Haggadah because he leaves out the one about the roasted meat. We add instead about reclining. That's what we have. Was the 4th question and it's actually listed as the 4th question. Generally, a lot of people say, why do we keep it as 4 questions? It's because there's so many 4s. We have the 4 cups of wine, we have the 4 sons, so we have the 4 questions. But it would seem it's not a requirement, but it's something that's very beloved in the Seder. I know, that's something people look forward to. And then it says, "L'fidate shel bein aviv malamdo," according to how much the child knows, his father teach him. And it says, "Maschil beganus mesayim b'shevach." It says you start with the negative and you end with the praise, with the positive. V'dorish merami ovid avi ad shigma kol parsha kula. And it says you make a drush, or you expound in a homiletical sense this passage from Deuteronomy 26:5 until the rest of that paragraph. That's what we do. We read verses from that, and then we explain the verses, usually by comparing them to other verses in the Bible, and that's how what we have. And I guess technically you could use any way of doing that. That passage is actually talking about the Bikurim, the first fruits, when they brought the first fruits to the temple, which seems to have nothing to, that's really has more to do with Shavuos, not with Pesach, and what's the connection, and in a way it's kind of the answer that everything, I think the Belzer of Rabbi Arla Belzer, he said, in Israel they always say Hakol B'Seder. That's a popular saying in Israel. Everything is in order. So the Belzer Rav, he says Hakol B'Seder. Everything depends on the Seder. Meaning Pesach is really the be-all and end-all of what it means to be a Jew in a certain way. I remember there's a museum, a coal mining museum in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And they have the history of Scranton, and included is the religious diversity and history of Scranton. And they have this one section where they basically have recreated a sanctuary of a Roman Catholic church that was made by Polish immigrants. And then they have exhibits right next to it of other religions. So then they have about Judaism. And there's a passage from a book that was written in like 1902. I don't remember. I remember taking a picture of it and tweeting. I was so impressed by this. They said basically, I don't remember the exact wording, but it said something like, and it was a secular book. I don't even think it was written by someone Jewish, but they said, if you don't have the Passover Seder, you're basically not Jewish. Something like that, And it's like, it's not exactly true, but on the other hand, it's something that a very high percentage of Jews participate in some form, even if it's not the exact right time or something. There's something very, pressing about the Passover Seder. So usually in the car, I just turn on the radio, and whatever's on the radio, and I'll switch back and forth between. And then I was like, let me listen to something Jewish. So now I got I think it's Bluetooth adapter that I plug into the car that then it puts into the radio, and I can put from my phone something. So if I'm able to remember ahead of time to download something to listen to, so I listened to a few lectures on Pesach from the YU Torah. I didn't go to YU, but I took some courses there mostly online courses, but they were some very distinguished speakers. One I listened to today was Rabbi Beryl Wein, who I remember from Israel, and he spoke there a few days ago. And the other one, which I think was very interesting, and maybe I'll email it to everybody, was from the former chief rabbi of England. I mean, he's the chief rabbi emeritus, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. And he discusses there what's going on here, because it says, we start with the negative and we end with the positive. He says it much better than I could. And in the Gemara, there's a whole discussion. What does it mean? And one opinion says that it means we start off by saying we were slaves and now we're free. And the other opinion says we start off by saying our ancestors worshiped idols and now God brought us close. And he ends off saying that the Rambam, that Maimonides, brings them both together and says we have to say both. And in a sense, what Rabbi Sachs said was that to say we were slaves and now we're that's for the children. And to say we were idolaters and now we're monotheists, that's for us. That's a more grown approach. But what he was discussing there is how religion in general, and in particular Judaism, is, and he points out of how many of the great psychologists in the 20th century were Jewish, and some were nominally Jewish and some were very actively, strongly Jewish. You think of like Viktor Frankl, who was, Judaism was a very big part of his life, and his writings and so forth. And then he said, with the exception of Jung, and Jung brings so many Jewish themes in his writings. So you have, he certainly was a student of Judaism, even though he wasn't Jewish. He brings a lot of Kabbalistic themes, which is mind-blowing that you have a non-Jewish and psychologist who is so obsessed with Kabbalah in the ways that a lot of Jews poo-pooed it and saw it as kind of superstitious. He really understood that it's really meaning something deeper and psychological behind these terms. But what Rabbi Sachs was pointing out is that all of these actions that we do in our mitzvos are really practices of cognitive behavioral therapy, in a sense. That the Pesach Seder is basically a cognitive behavioral therapy session. That to bring us, with our neuroplasticity, bring out certain things that we want in our lives. And so a child is impressed by hearing about miracles. An adult can see things that are higher than that, but we have to bring out both levels, because we all have that inner child also, and even children also have kind of an inner adult, and to bring both of those levels together, and they're not really contradictory to each other, they're really all together. And
but I think that's absolutely right, because as part of cognitive behavioral therapy, you're asked to imagine yourself actually doing whatever it is your brain is doing, or whatever the plan is. And that's what we say in the Seder. Yeah. You're here at the Seder, you were back at
Tzorech liros es atzmo kilu hu yatzim Mitzrayim. That's what we're going to see next in the Mishnah, is that you're supposed to see yourself like the next Mishnah says that. And it's interesting because the Rambam says Tzorech laharos es atzmo, which is different than liros es atzmo, but we'll get to that. So the Mishnah continues, Rabban Gamliel haya omer kol shaloi omar Shlosha dvarim elu b'Pesach lo yad tzidei chavaso. So he says, Rabban Gamliel, how these were the three major things you have to mention at the Seder. You want to skip over parts of it, you can skip over. You don't have to say the whole thing, but these you got to say. Pesach, Be'elohein Pesach Matzah Mara. And they are Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice. Matzah is matzah, and Mara, the bitter herbs. Pesach al shum shepasach hamakach abati aviseinu b'Mitzrayim. It's Pesach because it's Passover, because God passed over the houses of our ancestors in Egypt. Matzah al shum shenigal aviseinu b'Mitzrayim, and matzah because God redeemed us from Egypt. Mar al shum shemeru mitzvah mischaya aviseinu b'Mitzrayim, and mar bitter herbs because God embittered the lives of our ancestors in Egypt. In our version of the Haggadah, it cites scriptural verses to support all of these ideas, as opposed to what we have here. I was listening to another lecture, was Rabbi Wein, who's a big historian and everything I mentioned briefly, and he said that these three ideas are really essential in Judaism, not just, and again, so meaning and I'm not going to get into exactly what he said, but again, we bring up these ideas in order to invest something that's really for the rest of that we take with us all year and really for the rest of our lives. The experience of the Pesach Seder is, like we said, it's this cognitive behavioral therapy, like Rabbi Sachs suggested, and he said, that's really what our sages said. Heragel nasa teva sheni. The Rambam says that when you have something is a habit, it becomes second nature. And so if you develop good habits, which is part of, he said, even through a naturalist approach to religion, because he was also discussing the difference between having a rational approach versus a mystical approach to religion, but he said he prefers the terms natural and supernatural. Rabbi Sachs was saying, he said that there was a story in the Talmud, a miracle happened to somebody, and one person, and there were two opinions in the Talmud. One said, look how great this person is because a miracle happened to him. And the other one said, no, look at how lowly he is, that God had to change nature for this guy, because whatever, his wife passed away and he had no money and all these things, and he went through all of these misfortunes, and God, in order to save his child, he had to make a miracle happen, which even has a natural component to it, but the fact that it happened to him because it's so rare. And the thing the point is not to say we don't believe that the supernatural can happen. Of course we believe that can happen. And that was what he was saying. Like the Rambam says, we don't believe in the Torah of Moses because of the miracles he did. Meaning other religions, we don't deny that miracles happen to other religions, but we say that doesn't mean anything. We have in Deuteronomy 13, it says, all right, if a prophet comes and his prophecies come true, but he says to change the Torah, that's a false prophet. It doesn't matter if he can do miracles and have true prophecies. That's not what we base our belief on. We base it on God revealed the Torah in front of millions of people at Sinai. It's a story you can't make up. That type of, even though, all right, there are people who could argue that, but that's a basic idea of Jewish apologetics. And so here we have the same idea as, on one hand, you're telling the kids, like we said before, miracles, that's what impresses them. But adults want to hear about more lofty ideas, or they should want to. I don't know if they want to, but they should. And nowadays, a lot of people are still kids for a long time. And then it says, every generation person has to see like he left Egypt. And we said that the Rambam says laharos, to demonstrate, not to see himself but again, through that action of demonstrating, through doing this drama of the Seder, it's supposed to get into your brain and change things. And then it says he should see himself as if he's going. So like we just said, and it says you should tell your child on that day, saying, because of this the Lord did for me when I went out of Egypt, and the meaning that I went out of Egypt. And the same thing as we see in our own lives. And then it continues with the how the Seder continues. Therefore, we're required to offer thanksgiving and all kinds of praise and blessings to the one who did for our ancestors, and us, put ourselves in their shoes and recognize that if they weren't redeemed, we would probably still be indebted to this. And that's how it ends off, that he took us out from slavery to freedom, from sadness to joy, from mourning to festivity, from darkness to great light, and from subjugation to redemption. And we say before him, Hallelujah. we give praise to Hashem, and then continues with the Hallel. All right. Well, I guess we can probably do the rest of this Mishnah, this parak, next week. I don't know if you're interested. I could send you the link. I'll send to everybody the link to Rabbi Sachs. Because I don't agree 100% with everything he says there, but I find it interesting, and he's a great speaker and a great scholar, and I agree with a lot of things he says. So, and it doesn't matter if I agree with him, because who am I? So.